Welcome. Today we have my dear friend Jeff Baize and Kimbra. We're going to talk with Jeff, and he's going to spill some secrets about behind the scenes at the Playboy Mansion.
And have you ever had in your life a moment that transformed the rest of your life forever? A pivotal moment. For me, it was lunch with Jamal Wilkes. I mean, that changed who I was in so many ways. Jamal turned out to be, first of all, let me say, Jamal is a scholastic All-American, straight A's at UCLA, while taking the Bruins to 2 national titles. So he's a very intelligent man, very much of the intellect, capable of being part of, rolling with our group. But more importantly, I have never met a human being that is more genuinely decent, honest, kind. His father was a preacher. His grandfather was a preacher. And after that lunch, we became closest friends, one of my best friends. And still, like last year when I got married, he was the one that gave the toast at my wedding, so we've stayed very close. So as I got to know Jamal and he started coming to these events we hosted, Jamal was chairman for UCLA Unicamp for underprivileged kids. Now this is the connection. So I'm talking to Jamal one day, and I really fell in love with the charity. And what Unicamp does, it takes underprivileged children, in LA, usually probably about 70% African American, maybe, or 60% African American, 30% Latino, and the rest, whatever. And it takes them up to camp where they can get guidance and counseling and open up to positive alternatives in life. And it's a beautiful thing because it's getting these kids at a young age saying there's a better way outside of gangs and drugs and violence and all that other stuff. Wonderful program. I really loved what it was about. So I'm sitting there with Jamal one day over lunch, and I said, hey, Jamal, we haven't had a big Christmas party for REACT. We ought to have a big event, not only invite the senior brass, but everybody in the industry, finally give them an opportunity to rub elbows with all these top guys. He goes, well, that's a good idea, Jeff. And I said, and you know what else? We're going to do a charity event for Unicamp. Now, I thought Jamal would have said, fantastic.
If you like our videos, go ahead and click on like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
This is how good of a friend is. He was concerned for me. He goes, well, Jeff, REACT is still growing, and are you sure it could be risky? And, are you sure you want to put REACT at that kind of, it may not go well. And I thought, no, here's how it's going to work, Jamal. We say we're going to do it, and then we make it happen. That's it, period. We're going to do it. And so we had our first big event, open to the world. And I rented a huge yacht, one of these big hornblower yachts down in Marina del Rey.
Oh, yeah.
And
I know
so
hornblower.
we packed it full of people. We went out in the ocean. We had a charity auction on board. Fantastic evening. Jamal was on fire that night. He was behind the microphone auctioning off stuff, talking about Unicamp. And we had a captive audience, obviously. I mean, what are they going to do? Go in the water? So by the time we got finished, we raised $8,000 net out for Unicamp. Great, yeah. Every year thereafter we started doing it. We did it at the Peterson Automotive Museum. I don't like having it at hotel ballrooms because it's, the same rubber chicken, same, I me, I'm different. I always have to do something. One year we had it at the Museum of Flying in Santa Monica, where people ride flight simulators. And Edward James almost came to that when we honored him with an award. And Eddie's an interesting guy too. He loved what we were doing. But that was a night, we call it the High Flyers Ball, hence the Museum of Flying High Flyers. And then it stopped. So every year thereafter, it became the High Flyers Ball. And it was the ball. It was the #1 event in real estate everyone wanted to go to every year. And it was a lot of work for me, but we were raising a lot of money for the charity. And one day I'm sitting down with a girl I know, and I said, I think this you need to do something. And I said, maybe we do it at a mansion, like, sort of like a Southern mansion, where we do it sort of that theme and whatever. And then she goes, well, I know the security guy over at the Playboy Mansion. I'm like, what, really? And then this is where the Playboy Mansion comes in. Now, as you know, Playboy is controversial for, women's groups and whatever. Donald Trump loved it because he was on the cover of Playboy magazine and he brags about that. Me, I'm ambivalent. I just think it would be a great way to make a lot of money for these kids. And so I wrote an idea by Jamal, and Jamal was like, brilliant, Jeff. But that's, you just can't. The Playboy Mansion does not open its doors for anybody. You got to be ESPN or MTV. I'm just a guy going in saying, knock on the door, hey, can I have a party here? They would never do that, right? So that became the question, how do we get our event at the Playboy Mansion? And so we got lucky because at that time, Hefner was married to, I want to say her name was Kimberly, I think, and she wanted to help children's charities, and Unicamp is a children's charity. Number two, their next door neighbors, UCLA. They're in Homey Hills overseeing UCLA, and there's a little bit of tension there between the Hefner Mansion and UCLA. And they thought, great, we're going to help a charity there. And then lastly, when I put the phone call in and explained it, I said, I want to bring Jamal Wilkes. He'll tell you more about it. Okay, well, Jamal's coming. They opened the door. Went back there in one afternoon. It was a Thursday afternoon. They gave me a tour of the mansion, personal tour. I saw the little zoo there and what was down in the grotto and everything, and got to know the guys. And over time, those guys, first John Luther, who ran the state, was looking at me askance saying, is this guy for real? Are we going to hang ourselves with this guy? Convince him to do it. After that, after a few years, we became very close friends. And all the people at the mansion and I became really tight because we kept our word. Our parties are not like, I understand the MTV party, people were getting naked, jumping in the pool, ripping it apart. We were staid group, guys coming in business suits, wealthy guys, whatever. And they liked that, and I'd get bands like Temptations, War, Doobie Brothers, Richard Marx, they'd come and play. And so it gave a little bit of a cachet, if you will. So that's how we started doing the Unicamp event. And then at that point, it became crazy. Everybody wanted to get involved with REAC, and I kept the doors closed. And so, one night I'm walking around the Playboy Mansion during one of our event, and everybody's grabbed. There's 700 people. Everyone's trying to grab my short shirt collar saying, hey, come over here. I want you to meet. I can't walk 10 feet without people mobbing me, right? Now, I'm not an A-lister, not a B-list. I'm not on the list, never was, never close to it. But that night, I knew what it was like to be a celebrity walking down the street and everybody wanted a piece of you. And it's not good. It's not good. You don't like it because you want to have your piece and meet the people you want to meet and kind of float around, not have people grabbing you and just yelling at you everywhere you go. So I ended up hanging out in the mansion with John Luther and the Playboy staff, watching the party from a window, drinking scotch with them, having a good time. But, at that point in time, I'd be sitting there drinking and saying, here I am, a guy that loaded the truck, came to Los Angeles, didn't know a goddamn person, and next thing you know, I see my photo in the LA Times, they call it Tower of Influence, 20 most influential people in real estate. And there I am, how did this happen? But it's just seat of the pants, thinking out of the box, being creative. And so we started having events at the Playboy Mansion thereafter. So that's the background, kind of a long story, but there's a lot of side stories over the years that I could, I'll let you ladies talk now.
Well, yeah,
that was fascinating. Really interesting. And I didn't know all that. I've known you all these years. You were my neighbor, and I didn't know all of these details. You are a very humble man, Jeff.
Oh.
So you've always been the nicest too. So
I tell you what, I'll drink some more of this and I won't be so humble.
Well, let's hear it. Let's get it.
We need some bragging. We need some more bragging. No, I'm kidding.
So I have a question. So I also know that you dated a playmate. Is that did you meet her at the mansion or
actually
Playboy Mansion? Yeah,
when we had our event at the mansion, we'd have, of course, you have to pay the mansion for it, but we'd have, 15, 20 playmates. Now, I know, Kellie, you were a Playboy Bunny at one of the Playboy clubs. Which is very different
than a playmate. I was just a waitress with ears and a tail.
Well, with bunny ears.
Devin DeVasquez was the playmate. She was the first Latina on the cover of Playboy. She was on American Idol and won the $100,000 spokesmodel, which when they used to have that. Wow. And so she became a little bit of a celebrity. And she showed up at the mansion at one of our events, and I got to know her, and we started to date thereafter. And she was one of my inside sources of information. But she made it very clear when people would call her a bunny, she just, I'm not. So evidently there's a tier to this. You're a Playboy Bunny, meaning you work at the Playboy Club. You're a Playmate if you're in a Playboy magazine, but you're a celebrity Playmate if you have the centerfold and on the cover. And she goes, I'm a celebrity Playmate. Okay, there you go. But we didn't date long. If you live in West LA, you cross paths. I mean, I've dated some actresses, like one was on Star Trek and whatever. And, you have an image of what these women are like, but then when you meet them, it's not necessarily.
Some famous people are kind of crazy, aren't they? Either it drives them to it, or it has to be crazy to end up being in that position. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Like Gary Busey, there's a story there, as you know. I got to know Gary Busey. It's not an act. He is crazy as hell, man. That is one nutty guy.
We had our
even in person, man. I could tell you many stories about that cat. He's
One time I got in a limo, and you don't remember it, Kelly, but I was in the limo. We thought we were going to Playboy Mansion, and our mutual friend Lola was with the limo in us. Gary Busey got in, and he started to get in a verbal fight with everybody in the limo just the minute he sat down. And I was like, what's up with this
what
guy?
I remember is you and I were at the Playboy Mansion, invited by Jeff to one of his charity events.
I do remember that.
Gary Busey there.
So maybe that was the same night. It was all a big blur.
It might be, but he was very strange, like really strange, just rambling about all kinds of things that didn't make sense, but still trying to talk to us and engage us in conversation that we didn't know what to say. It didn't make sense. So I don't know. He's definitely
I met Gary. I used to ride in a group of Harley Davidson riders. We all worked out at Sports Club LA, and they're all in the entertainment industry. And one was a cosmetic surgeon to the start. Very, very wonderful guy, Frank Ryan, Dr. Ryan. And we were close friends. And I was over at his house in Malibu. He had this ranch, and Gary showed up one day with this buxom lady. And, he found out I was going to have an event at the Playboy Mansion. He goes, "Oh yeah, I want to come to your party." And I said, "Oh, okay, Gary." And I said, I do my Buddy Holly. I'll do my Buddy Holly thing, and I'll bring my guitar, and I'll play Buddy Holly. And I said, "Oh, that's great." And I said, because we're trying to help these kids out. He goes, "Yeah. And he said, "I got a ministry, I said, "You got a ministry, Gary?" "Oh yeah, I got a ministry. We do great things." "What do you do, Gary?" "Well, yeah, I got a ministry." Didn't tell me what it was, so I said, "Okay, Gary, how'd I get hold of you?" He goes, "I'm going to give you my phone number." I said, "Give me your phone." He said, "Yeah, I'm going to give you your phone. You won't forget it. I'll give you my phone number." "Okay, what is it?" "Area code 213, blah, blah, blah." He goes, 4445, 2 best guns ever made.
What a trip.
I'm like, okay, Gary, to this day, if he still has that cell number, I could call him on the phone. But, and so a few days before the event, I was going to make arrangements for him to come and play. And I dialed the phone, his phone number, and, "Hello, who is this? I said, "Well, this is Jeff." You know, what? Why are you calling me? "Gary, shut up." Well, anyway, worked it out. He wanted me to have a limousine pick him up, and he understood many of the musicians were volunteering their time. Every single penny we made went to these underprivileged kids. So I'm stingy with money at this event. So hiring a limo, whatever comes out of that. So I went and got a limo. So Busey shows up at the mansion. Talented man, great actor, does great Buddy Holly's up there trying to hustle up on all the playmates. And then towards the end of the evening, he goes, "Hey, Jeff, come here, buddy. I said, what's going on, Gary?" And he goes, "Hey, can you give me an honorarium or something?" I go, what do you mean? He goes, "These are musicians here. You're giving them money, right?" And I said, "Well, a lot of them are volunteering, not that much." He goes, "Well, Jeff, I need some bread money. Can you give me some money?" And I said,
"Oh, wow.
Okay, Gary, how about $250? "Oh, yeah, that'd be great. So I said, "I'll send you a check tomorrow." He goes, No, can you give it to me tonight? Write me a check tonight.
Wow.
So I said, okay, well, guess what happened? 2 days later, national news, Gary Busey beat up his ex-wife, had been coked out, whatever. And even Saturday Night Live did on their weekend update, did a thing about Gary Busey doing that. And I'm like, oh my God, I gave him the money that he did that with, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, it was, again, it's Gary, or as the singer of my band called him, Gary Abusey. You know, it's just, he's a character, quite a character.
Wow, that's quite a story, huh?
Yeah.
Extorted for $250.
Yeah, we were both. Remember, well, we kind of have a story like that when we did on a much smaller scale, our little Road to Hollywood.
Yeah, I was just thinking that same thing.
One of the musicians, and let's not say who, we won't embarrass him.
Yeah.
But he asked us for money too, and it was all volunteer. They were judges, you know, they were judging, but not arranged ahead of time. It should have been negotiated ahead of time.
Exactly. But anyway, that's life, right?
Yeah.
But I have to say, there are others that I got to know, like Bill Maher, who came to our events a few times.
Yes.
I really like the guy. I mean, he is hardcore liberal, and some almost think he's kind of has this caustic, hard approach on television. But when you meet him in real life, he's a great guy. He understood why I was hosting the events there. And we talked a lot about, you know, the Playboy enterprise, and he told me a few things that I didn't know. But he's a good guy. Alice Cooper and his wife. Were you there when Alice Cooper came?
I don't think
Alice
so.
Cooper and his wife, what's her name? Goddard. Kimberly Goddard, I think. She's the ballerina. I will tell you, Alice Cooper is probably one of the nicest celebrities you'll ever meet.
I've heard that about him.
Yes.
Humble, very appreciative, just quiet, and very approachable by anybody. Just
I know.
a nice guy.
I know. I worked on a commercial with him once, and during the break, he was telling me about his daughter, how she was trying to come out here to be an actress, and he was so sweet and so nice. And,
and he's been married to the same woman since 1976. They're still madly in love. You know, it's everything to him.
That's
and
lucky.
That's rare. That's rare.
Yeah.
Involved there, finding the right person. So good for him.
And I saw those pictures with you and Bill Maher, and I was going to ask you about it actually, because I'm a fan of his show. I like his show. So I was like, Bill Maher.
Yeah.
I always get he makes me think. I mean, you know, some people like him, some people don't, but he raises some interesting questions sometimes.
He has good guests.
Bill's a great guy, and meeting a lot of the musicians was fun. The one that I really was impressed with was Skunk Baxter. If you know, he played with the Doobie Brothers.
Oh,
and
I've heard of him.
Yeah, I mean, well, he played with the Doobie Brothers. Let me think. I was just here looking at some notes. You know, Doobie Brothers played with Eric Clapton. He played with Barbra Streisand. Played with Steely Dan. He even started with Hendrix. So he became a musician's musician, a sessions musician, and incredible guy. And I spent time with him before an event. I bought a Stratocaster guitar to auction off that night. He was going to sign it. He came back, and just him and I sat in a tent and talked for a long time while he tuned it up and did certain mechanical things to it. Now, here's a crazy thing about Skunk. People don't realize. The guy never had any formal training. His next door neighbor was a designer of the Sidewinder missiles in the military. So he got into it, first as a hobby, reading aviation. He became so good at what we call this compressed data algorithms for missile trajectories that he then started contracting with the Department of Defense. Then he started to chair a committee on missile design and is one of the top advisors to government on missile technology. Skunk Baxter, you know, you see
That's
guys.
impressive.
Doobie Brothers. He was in the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow.
It's crazy, but yeah, but he was a great guy. I mean, he very personable. This is when we're working with veterans, which is why he wanted to get involved.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
And by the way, the switch from Unicamp to veterans, I was on the executive board of Unicamp because we had raised so much money for him. And some people on the board did not like having the event at the mansion. I said, well, what are the alternatives? Because we're busting the budget. And they're just like, well, we just can't have it there because, you know, boobs and naked women and kids, they don't. I said, no, those aren't our events. There's no nudity at our events. There's nothing about, you know. But it was hard for a lot of people to palate, you know, and some people writing letters to UCLA saying, Playboy Mansion. So finally it got a little heated and Unicamp took a different turn that, you know, I wasn't able to follow, just in terms of philosophies. And so a very dear friend of mine was founded the National Veterans Foundation. Famous guy. He was on 60 Minutes with this charity, during the Vietnam era and whatever. And so we got tight, and we started doing it for disabled vets coming back from, Afghanistan and Iraq. That led to a whole different direction of the events.
Wow, that's
I think
great.
those are the ones I went to. I went to a couple of your National Veterans Foundation events.
Yeah.
At Playboy.
And we had a lot of soldiers back from the
Yeah.
war that were talking to the crowd. And Skunk, he really got into that, and as did I. And these were wonderful. The most kind people serve our country, and they end up in terribly devastating conditions. And they're thanking me. They're saying, "Oh, thank you so much." I said, "Whoa, time out. Who should be thanking who? What you've given for our, our country." And for me, that was everything. As a matter of fact, before the event, I'd be down. They had the sort of a cellar beneath the mansion. I'd be with 20 playmates, and I'd say, "Gather around." I said, "Tonight there's going to be a lot of rich guys trying to grab you." And I said, "Just ignore them. Spend time with these vets. They deserve your respect."
Right.
And the women were great.
Yeah.
A lot of the rich guys, my industry developers, they'd be taking off their wedding ring and, "Hey, Jeff, come here. Lexi likes me. Can you give me her phone number?" And I go, "Nah, I ain't a pimp." You want her phone number? Get it. But so many guys thought I could hook them up with playmates, and it was.
Right.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was-
what I loved about those parties was the mansion is beautiful. I mean, going in the grotto. And do you remember the monkeys, Kimbra? I loved that. Was my favorite part.
I did feel though that the mansion needed a little bit of a facelift. It just
It
seemed
was kind of dated.
reeked of the 70s or whatever time period that was. But I was so appreciative to be there. I still had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But I was reading that it got sold. Where it got sold?
Yeah.
Right.
Who bought it?
Hefner passed, and they sold the mansion, and they're still renting it out, leasing it out.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but it's not the same. And those days are behind me. I went down for a month and a half, 2 months working on that damn thing, and it just got to the point where it was almost a one-man show putting that thing on, because you can't depend on people to come through, and you end up taking up the slack for them. You both know.
Yeah.
It was challenging.
When it's something nonprofit,
it's a lot of work.
Exactly.
You end up doing it all yourself. Yeah. So tell us about Hugh Hefner and his dealings.
Well, let me put it like this. I never got to know the man personally on any kind of level. I met his brother. I met all the people in his entourage. He'd come down to the party from time to time. So with that said, I often feel it's not fair to say things about people unless you really know that person. But here is my takeaway of Mr. Hefner. Brilliant man in terms of business shrewdness. He started Playboy at a time when he knew it'd be an uphill battle, but he fought it, won, and built an empire out of it. And so that speaks to his business acumen. I will say that one of the challenges I had in warming up to his personality would be that he talked about all these playmates as being his family, right? And we're our big family here. Truth be told, though, and I learned this from the playmates because I got to know a few of them, his rule was this: as long as they were young and pretty and were not having any male companionship or whatever, they were part of the family, welcome at the mansion anytime. If they got married, they could still go as long as they're young and pretty, but their husband, heck no. Boyfriends, never.
It's gross.
It just had to be them. And, that's a family? No, that's a man. Another thing about Hugh, and I learned this from guys that worked at the mansion, is a lot of people think he hung out with A-listers, on private parties, whatever. That's not true. He actually would not invite the big A-listers like a Charlie Sheen or whomever over for he had like poker night every Tuesday. The type of actors he liked were the B-list or C-list, like character actors. You would know them because you see, I know that person. I've seen him on a Western. I just don't know his name. That's who his entourage was. And it took me a while. And John Luther was explaining this thing again. He was the general manager of Playboy, and he was explaining it to me. And you think about it, what kind of a person would intentionally avoid the upper echelons A-lister?
He's insecure and didn't want the competition.
Exactly. That was my read on it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it kind of gets back to, you know, his family and what he was about. And, you know, I'm not judging him or anything about what he did. It's just, that's who he was. And so, you know, a lot of people like, he's this great guy, boy, he, you know, I don't know. I don't know the man personally, just.
Well, I have a take on Playboy because I have been part of that outer family. You know, I feel like I think 21 when I became a Playboy Bunny and was in Columbus, Ohio. And it was total exploitation, but we were all young girls who didn't know better. That costume was so darn cute. To a young girl, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to wear that. It's so cute. And that's really how we all felt. You know, I've always loved clothes. I love dressing them. I think we talked about on one of our podcasts, Kimbra, about I used to take my clothes and my underwear and sew clothes that look like Cher from my Barbies, and the Cher outfits for my Barbies.
Right.
And I grew up playing with Barbies and their perfect figures and dressing them in clothes. So to me, that bunny costume was the cutest I could be, you know, those ears, it's Halloween every day. So I loved wearing those costumes and really was totally naive to the whole process, not realizing you're being exploited and men are leering at you. I never even thought of that or noticed that. So, and I really feel like the other girls that I was, you know, working with, we were just waitresses in a costume. I mean, you know, they make it's like some salacious thing. It was just a bunch of young girls waiting on tables and serving food. I was fortunate. I got to be a VIP bunny. I didn't really have to touch any of the food or anything. I just kind of took the drink order and served the cocktails. But it was hard work. It was really challenging. We had 3-inch high heels we had to wear. If our pantyhose got as much as a snag, it was kind of a racket. We had to buy a new pair, and they were like $3 a pair, and we had to buy them from Playboy. So they were making money on us, paying us the minimum wage that they could pay us. It really was a racket, but I enjoyed it. We got to do personal appearances and sign autographs, and it was, you know, pretty much a big deal. But I have some fond memories of being a bunny. And then when I went to New York, I was a bartender at the Playboy Empire Club, where we had the guys. They brought guys in, and guys were working with us, and they were called the Rabbits. So we had cool. Girls were bunnies, guys were rabbits. That was, you know, a ton of fun because, again, it was New York's youth. The talented actors and actresses and models of the town all wanted to work for Playboy. It was a really big deal. So I worked with, who can I think of that anybody would know? One is Robert Mailhouse, who was in Dog Star with Keanu Reeves, and he's done a ton of TV series and movies. And then these twins, Jeff and Jerry Rector, who are pretty well known in Hollywood. And a ton of other people. I can't remember everyone, but we just really had a good time. But a couple of my little behind the scenes stories. One is when I worked at Playboy in Ohio, when I was a bunny. When we first started, we were all in training. We had, all the bunnies are in the room, and they bring out our chef to introduce him to us. And they're like, they did not allow any dating. We were not allowed to date each other. Nobody's allowed to date. So they bring him out. He walks in the room and everybody's gasping. Oh, it's a room full of girls. This guy that looks like Jesus. Literally, he's like a gorgeous Jesus. And we're all like, oh, wow. Well, we weren't allowed to date him, but I did. So anyway, that was kind of my
good for you
behind the scenes story. But I was like, I like him. So, I dated him. It wasn't serious or anything, but I did. And then in New York, what we would do is after the club would close, which was very late, I think stayed open till like 3 or 4 in the morning. Then the club would close and the managers let us, we would play music and dance and we would drink champagne, open up the bottles of champagne and drink them and just party into the morning hours, just having a good time after working all night. So it was really a good time with really good people. It was nothing seedy or salacious.
You know,
or anything.
it's interesting too, like Playboy sort of personifies a certain time in America. It's just so quintessential an American thing, you know, and a lot of people from other towns, smaller towns, to see the Playboy Mansion is like, oh my gosh, that's like a dream, right?
Yeah.
A lot of red.
It's big time. Seems like, you know, something so out of touch and big time. And I think it was also, you know, an awakening in our history.
Right.
I do think, like I said, I was very naive at the time, and I don't like being exploited. I didn't realize I was being exploited at the time. If I'm being exploited, I want to name my price, and I want to know that I'm being exploited.
Right.
So in my mid 30s, I remember I was bartending in my mid 30s, and this place that I worked at, the girls wore a schoolgirl uniform, like that Britney Spears schoolgirl uniform in her video.
Sure.
And so the guy bartenders would wear a black t-shirt and black pants. So I kept showing up every night in a black t-shirt and black pants. And my boss was like, you have to wear the uniform, the schoolgirl uniform. And I'm like, I don't want to wear it. I want to wear what the guys are wearing. Why do I have to wear that? Because I had matured and figured out like, wait, you guys are trying to exploit me. Right. I'm not gonna let that happen. And so I was really tormented about it. I really was unhappy and upset. And I was calling a couple of other girlfriends that had been bartenders in Hollywood clubs. And, you know, I was making like between $500 and $800 a night. So I really didn't want to lose the job, but I was being stubborn and trying to live by my principles at this point in my time. I'm like, I know what's going on here. It's not fair. Why do obviously the guys aren't going to wear a schoolgirl outfit. So,
unless it's a different kind of club.
I guess. That's true. So I was really tormented about it and really tortured. And I did give in. I wore the outfit. And then one night, I remember this girl wanted to put her drinks on somebody else's tab. And I said, you can't do that without his permission. If he gives me permission, you know, I'll be glad to do it, but no. And so she said, well, you're dressed like a whore. And I was like, you don't understand. I never wanted to wear this stupid outfit. You don't. I was so mad, but it was kind of like, that's what you get, Kellie, for compromising your principles. You're getting called that horrible name. And anyway, it was just, you know, those are things that women are put in these positions that I think are really unfair, and in other ways too. It's not just about a uniform. We are exploited. We are overlooked. We are not given a fair chance to compete with the boys. And it happens, you know, in every industry. So it's not just that industry. It's just more clear.
It's funny because my stepfather was watching that show Mad Men, which is, I guess, on Netflix or something somewhere. And he said to me the other day, he was like, God, I forgot how badly women were treated in the 60s, you know, the way they, you know, always being, you know.
We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. Well, you know, and then when about the uniform thing, I even had called, I can't remember, some organization about, you know, workers' rights. And I said, is a restaurant allowed to make a female employee wear a different costume than the males? And they said, yes. That is legal. And I was appalled. I could not believe that it was illegal in this day and age. And I do think there's been somewhere along the way, you know, in between now and when I was throwing my little tantrum, there's been a lawsuit. So I don't know if they're still allowed to do it, but I think they are. I mean,
well, I think if it's a private, like what we're going to talk about later, if it's a private club, or, you know, you have the right to say yes or no, you'll do it, but that's their rules, maybe, you know?
Well, I think that's how they look on it. But as a society, we need to decide, do we allow that? Are they allowed to pay a woman doing the same job differently than a man? Are they allowed to,
I don't know.
You know, I mean, are they allowed to make you do sexual favors for your boss?
Well, I think they would draw the line on that, but I'm not sure.
I mean, you know, and I'm pushing it, but it's still, you know, those are things we need to think about. I think as a society, do we want to, we're still I felt this way when I was doing the bartending and I had to wear the different uniform than a guy. I'm doing the exact same job.
Right.
I make the same money. Everything's the same, but they're making me wear a different uniform. And I feel like it should have been optional for me to wear
Yeah, that's a good
the
point.
other uniform. Anyway, but yeah, and then the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, Jeff, back to what your experience is. You told me that you had a mafia person come to one of your parties. Somebody in the mafia.
Oh, the mafia. Yeah. I got to be very careful how I describe this.
They'll come and get you.
If anybody is watching your podcast on YouTube, look up Michael Franzese, Franzese, I believe it is. He now does podcasts like, he was one of the top mafia bosses. That culture he talks about, but I can relate. We, through the veterans, one of the supporters of the veterans was a gambling casino on the East Coast. It was actually an Indian tribe casino, and they bought a table. You know, they laid down $10,000, and you know, the rule was if you bought a table, you could have one limousine access to the mansion. And so I won't tell you the name of the Indian tribe, but when these guys showed up, there wasn't a damn Indian. They were all hardcore New Jersey mafia. Big guys. And all I can say is, and Michael Franzese says this, when you are in their presence, you know it. When you are around a hardcore mafia boss, you just know it, because, you know, they hang in their group. It's only their group. They never go outside that group. The same people are always there. And when they're talking to you, if they don't like what you're saying, there's a look in their eyes like, it's like, I don't argue with people. I take care of it, you know. And it's hard to explain that. But these guys, I know they're all packing. And there's several bosses coming in for the Playboy Mansion because they'd never been there and this is their time, you know. So they're flying in, and each one of them wanted access in their own limousine, and I couldn't do it. And so one of these big New Jersey guy, my God, he was as wide as a truck and bigger than me. He probably was a head taller than me. And he was like about ready to tell me, you know, who are you to tell me what you know, so I'm like, so the head of Playboy security was over there, and I waved him because I got to know him after a while. I said, you know, look, Ron, these guys, you know, they're probably packing, they're mafia, you know, and there's some little friction going on. I just want to give you a heads up. And he goes, you're kidding? Really? And he goes, Jeff, here, take my gun. He had a gun. He wanted me to take his gun. And I said, yeah. Jeff and guns don't go well together. You know? That's not what I do. You know, I'm here having fun, raising money for veterans. But it was kind of kept me on edge that night watching those guys, because, you know, had Gary Busey gotten in their face, Gary Busey would have been found flipping cool the next day. So, you know, but fortunately, no incident happened. They gave a lot of money to the veterans, and then they got on their planes and went back to where people like that go. So that was an interesting. Now, I will say back regarding staff, got a call from a nurse handler for one of these soldiers. He said, you know, hi, Jeff, you know, I'm with Alex so-and-so. And he goes, he's quadriplegic. He'll be in a wheelchair. And I have a favor to ask him. What's that? He goes, well, he needs to be fed through a tube. And, you know, there's going to have all this food out there. Is there any way we could have some food for him, you know, to help him, you know, that night? So I said, wow, I'm sure that's not going to be a problem. So I called the Playboy Mansion. They got me in touch with, I believe his name was, it's Michael Boxham Carter, who was the executive chef, who happens to be a famous chef. And he was working in the kitchen. So I got him on the phone and I said, hello, Mr. Carter. My name is Jeff Baize, and I'm hosting an event there, and it's for the veterans. And I explained Alex's situation. And could you, you know, maybe, and I felt like I'm being posed, could you maybe make, you know, something special for him to eat? And there was silence on the other end of the phone. And he goes, Jeff, we will make him the best thing he's ever had. Matter of fact, it's Jeff, when he gets here, I want you to bring him back into the kitchen. We're going to give him a special tour. We're going to roll a, you know, we're going to make it just a one. And he just got so excited about this, you know.
Oh, that's
and,
nice.
Yeah, and that's kind of people that work in there. John Luther was just a wonderful guy. He cared I mean, he looked away on a lot of things where they could have hit us with money and charges that, John, he wouldn't, of course it's Hefner and he's not about to let a penny fall through and let Hefner find out, but he worked with us and kept us well into the black. I was able to, on any given event, I could cut a check, for $8,500 to $100,000 to the charity after the night. And Luther understood that. And and he was just, became a good friend. A lot of people became good friends there. So the staff at the mansion, I can't speak highly, better about them than, they're just great people. A lot of the celebrities, some of them were wonderful, like Boom Boom Mancini, who was a world champion boxer, lightweight, came, and kindest man. You think this guy's a professional fighter, but he was just so kind and generous and sweet. A lot of the celebrities were like that. And so, I don't want there to be, a takeaway that, some of these guys are too arrogant. Now, I will say Richard Marx had a little bit of an attitude, about he came because he was Richard Marx. And I knew there are some musicians like that. Dealing with the Doobie Brothers, crazy. They kept calling me the promoter. I talked to the musicians are calling me on the phone saying, yeah, we want to do it. We won't charge. This is great. We believe in the veterans. Some of us are ex-veterans. Skunk worked with the military, But then I'd get a call from their production manager or business manager and saying, okay, you're the promoter. Okay, well, we need to have, these risers and blah, blah, and it's going to cost, $10,000 for this, and just, I'm like, no, you don't. I'm not a promoter. I'm a guy throwing a party for veterans. That's it, man. But I couldn't get past that. And so I'd hit a wall. Then I'd call one of the musicians up and I'd say, look, no. It's not like that. We can do an acoustic set. That's what we'll do, an acoustic set. So I was never able to get, quote unquote, the Doobie Brothers. I just got the musicians of the Doobie Brothers to come. So I couldn't officially call them Doobie Brothers. But yeah, these guys, they play in the Doobies. They're
right.
And that's how Skunk showed up. And it was an interesting working in that world, promoting concerts, something I never want to do now. But,
yeah, well, when the manager's job is, and Kimbra is in the music industry too, and we know a lot of musicians, but the manager's job is to make sure they keep those standards. So and I've had musician friends complain about that too, because I've tried to get them involved in things I'm doing and they're like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll show up, but I'm under contract. So the management gets involved and they mess it all up. So
right.
That happens.
Whenever you get the suits involved, right?
Yeah, it's always about.
I think it's about this. These managers get a cut, right?
Yeah.
And they want to hit you with as big of a fee as they can and get their cut out of it. And they were, one of the managers says, you keep playing this Jewish mother on me, talking about the veterans and their needs and whatever. Because I got a business, man. So I was the Jewish mother, I guess. But these poor young kids, they come back from Iraq and and are we going to help them? And they're like, no.
You're funny.
And speaking of your point, Kellie, about young women that get into this. Now, bear in mind, in the 2000s, I think you came to some event in the early 2000s. These playmates, they're 18 years old. I had a daughter that age, so I'd go around and BJ Sullivan, who ran all of the playmates, I'd draw her aside and go, look, let me know if any of these guys get out of hand. I'm worried because they're like children to me, these girls. They're very beautiful. But you talk to them, they're like, and I felt like, and of course, these guys, particularly these wealthy real estate developer, whatever, taking their wedding rings off, trying to hustle up on these girls and touching and grabbing them. It was, for me, it kind of was a bad scene. Now, I had a moment with Tina Baccarat, and she was a celebrity playmate at the same time Pamela Anderson was, whatever, and we talked about it. She ended up being a receptionist at the Sports Club LA, and I would see her there, and we'd talk about it. She drew a line. She said, a lot of these girls, they're just too young to know. They don't know that they're being exploited. It's just sort of like you were saying, Kellie. She goes, but then some of them, as they get a little older, and I do know this to be the case, some of those playmates, and maybe they modeled for Maxim or whatever the spread was, they turned it into, business. They would have a number of boyfriends that would pay their rent for that month, say, and then they would, you know,
yeah,
and that's big. It's
yeah.
I found out through there's certain groups within, you know, Beverly Hills or whatever, you know, like at the Peninsula Club, some of these, I don't want to call them madams, but women hang out with these portfolios of beautiful women. They say, you know, here's a price tag. It's all done at a very high level. Because I know when a developer was telling me this, how he, you know, this guy, you know, 60 years old is with, you know, a 20-year-old, and you know, there's stuff going on, but that does happen.
I think most girls start out very innocent, and then there's an awakening. And at that awakening, you either go one way or the other. You either put your foot down and say, no, I'm above this and not going to participate, or you take advantage of it because you don't think you could do anything more with your life, maybe. So, but I do think most of them start out very innocently. So, you know. It's
and Tina was that way. She was very sweet, stuck to you know her values, and did her spread. And I didn't mean it. Did her
centerfold or whatever?
Yeah, or centerfold.
Yeah.
That was a double entendre.
Well, they don't do it anymore, right? They don't even have nudity in Playboy anymore because it became so common that they couldn't compete with the internet. So now they don't even have nudity. It's just, you know, pretty girls, I guess.
Yeah.
I haven't seen one. I don't know, but that's what I read somewhere. So,
but that
changing.
That was quite the experience. One of the things I really enjoyed was hanging out with the musicians, and particularly session musicians like Skunk Baxter and Sal Rodriguez, who was with the band War and whatever. These people, you know, when you hear, okay, Eric Clapton's a great, you know, one of the greatest guitarists, Eddie Van Halen, yeah, they're great guitarists, but the greatest of the great are all session musicians, because at a drop of a hat, they say, look, you know, Dolly Parton is doing this album. They need you there next week to play, you know, backup on all this music you've never heard before. And, you know, they just show up and they rip that music on their guitar or whatever, like it was theirs from the beginning. And they can do it instantly on any music you can imagine, any scale, any chord. And they are the best. And that's why it was delightful watching these musicians like Ollie Woodson of the Temptations. That guy, man, was on fire when he shows up in this Cadillac bright tuxedo that just glowed. And he got on stage, and it was just one of the greatest concerts I've ever. Now that wasn't to mention, that was the House of Blues. One year we booked the House of Blues, but just those musicians were just fun, and they're not big names, you know, like G.E. Smith. Who's that? I don't know. Well, G.E. Smith was the sort of the head of Saturday Night Live. He did many years, was in charge of their music. I first saw him in the late '70s playing for Hall & Oates. That guy's phenomenal, and all these session musicians. So that's really was one of the highlights of doing these events.
Yeah.
Good for you. How fun.
Well, yeah, really interesting to hear this, Jeff. Thank you for sharing with us. And I know even more about you now because I didn't know about all your other stuff, your business stuff, and creating that organization. That's so inspiring, especially to a young person. You know, if somebody hears this podcast and they hear that story, I hope they're inspired. And
that's true.
You know, make your own life, make your own path. Don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. And it sounds like that's what you did. And you're giving back also now by, you know, raising funds for nonprofits. And that's really admirable. Thanks, Jeff.
It sounds like you had a lot of gumption, as they say.
Yeah, for sure.
You need that.
Yeah, I think a little bit of smarts too, maybe.
Yeah.
If you read all of his accomplishments on his website. So anyway, well, really good to see you, Jeff. Thanks for coming by and joining us today. It was really fun. And we want to wish you a happy new year, even though we're well into January now. So moving on.
Well, it was an honor, and I really enjoy seeing you too after all these years. It's like we took off where we left off, and that's a beautiful.
Yep, it's been a while, but right where we left off.
Thank you so much for the thing that you invited Kellie to that I got to go to. By the way, I never thanked you, so I'm thanking you now.
My pleasure.
All right, take care.
Have a good, we'll see you soon, we hope.
Bye, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.